Hi there, this is Martin Page, and this is a podcast about a new album I recorded with Brian Fairweather called Bandages of Grace. We came together over a period of a couple of years to make an album that has been released on June the 30th, 2026. And I thought I would tell a bit about the backstory to the record, how it all came together, how we produced it and how we wrote together, and what made us do this. Crazy Englishman and Scotsman. Brian and myself have been together right back from the 70s. We've been in various bands and written songs for people. If you know about us, you know about our history. But we are best friends, and we hadn't been together for a long time. And we met up at the Huntington Gardens just to get together. And we really had a tremendous talk there, a talk about what really motivated us. And it was apparent that we should get together and experiment in my home studio. There was a philosophy behind this record. After all these years, we thought that it was important that we made a record that reflected our times now. And a lot of the record was really based on conversations. And right back there in the Huntington, I mean, I'm talking about 3 years ago, we talked about the philosophy of what we would do now if we wrote songs together. We wouldn't make another Q-Phil record. We really wanted to be honest about where we were in our lives. There was a spiritual dimension that meant a great deal to us. We wanted to express what we deeply felt at the stage of our lives now. It contrasted our songwriting approach from the past, in our early 20s to the present day, not wanting to tread the same commercially based ground we did earlier. It seemed really important for us to be honest, and it just seemed quite exciting that we would come together. We didn't rush at it. I wasn't sure that Brian was into this, and I don't think he was sure if he wanted to do it. But after we discussed that most of the music had to be coming from our head, our discussion touched on mysticism, on alchemy and the esoteric occult, in the sense of the hidden, the wonder of life that we don't really see every day, almost like shaping the invisible. We were both motivated in pursuing this musically, regardless of commercial ideals. There was a sense of hauntology and experimental approach, the nature of alchemy as a concept. And we would think about impromptu musical creation, never sure what the eventual outcome would produce. And that excited us. We usually prepare to go in the studio, and we thought if we went into the studio and we didn't prepare, what would happen? And that lit us up at this late stage, at this 11th hour. We felt like if we weren't prepared, but we sat in a room together with vintage equipment, with old gear, with analog gear that we'd had for years. I brought out of the old closets all the old gear, all the old synthesizers, all the old drum machines. In fact, the first drum machine I bought back in the 70s. And we went into the Owl's Nest, my extension to my studio, and we set all this old gear up, still talking and having tons of cups of tea, because it was about the philosophy of the whole thing. And we started jamming, and it was very strange to be jamming with Brian without any preparation, but it was pretty marvelous. And the first track we wrote became the title track of this album, Bandages of Grace. Let me play a bit of that to you now, starting with that drum machine that I bought right back in the day. We weren't talking about live playing, no quantization, and we put the drum machine through an amplifier, through a spring reverb, and recorded it mono, and to see if it would just get us going. Let me play you a bit of that now. Can you see pictures? And we'll stand back, look on amazed. Call me back the river, call me back the sky. Let me see cathedrals in your eyes. Taste the blood I've eaten, let Lazarus be raised. We will be your bandages. remember that it was really important to us that we jammed, and things came into a logic from a kind of unusual place for us. Of course, it had a feeling to us that we were doing something like neo-progressive rock with tinges of jazz and gospel. And I remember that when we did this track, we were using, as I said, that Compu Rhythm 78 drum machine, Roland drum machine, CR78. Of course, you could only get a power supply through Amazon. And Brian said, we've got to get a different power supply for this in America. We hadn't used this drum machine since we were in England. And then we just jammed on keyboards in that vintage room. And we put an old Shure 57 guitar mic up in front of an amp and sent the drum machine through it. We were playing old keyboards at the same time and recording things with our phone so we could just listen back later. All my vocals that appeared were phonetic. I wrote all the lyrics on the album, and both Brian and I were sort of fascinated with the sense of imagination being a religion. That's what heals the world. And this became a bit of an ecology song as well, Bandages of Grace, in the sense that if we can imagine it, we can do it, and we can make things happen. I remember that when Brian played his guitars, I just thought, oh my God, we're back in that wonderful place where I can sit back and let Brian do his thing. And his guitar playing, I think, really informs this record. We made a point of not being worried about hiss and amp noise. That stuff would add to the emotion. And listen to that little bit there when we come out of the sort of middle eight, and we didn't plan where middle eights or choruses or bridges were. I remember that our drummer from Qfil, Trevor Thornton, we wanted to get him involved as well, because he said, he looks like you're having fun in the sandbox. And we thought every Thursday we're going to get together and Trevor's going to pop across and get involved with us as well, which he did. He ended up actually writing 5 of the songs on this album and actually doing background vocals. He's never sung before, and he should never sing again. I told him he was Ringo. He was going to sing. But I remember he said, you need a different kind of percussion on this track. And if you listen back to when we come out of that middle eight section into the chanting of the natives, that kind of Australian outback feel, Trevor went home and built this kind of biscuit box with tools inside it and brought that over and shook it, and it had such a great sound. Anyway, I hope you're getting a sense of where this record was coming from, a little bit like I was saying in the sandbox. I've got to mention here also playing bass. I made a decision, and Brian told me to do that, to follow it, to play my bass, live bass, all through this, the way we used to start back in the 70s in my little flat in Islington. He played guitar, I played bass. That's all we had, and a drum machine. So I brought out my favourite bass, my Music Man, and I put it through one of my vintage pedals, Electric Mistress, and off we went. And I used that all through the record. It became, in a way, a kind of sound to this record. And what was fascinating to me is things I was playing on bass I would have never created in my younger days. This was almost like, it sounds old hat to say it, but something else was showing me the bass parts, and it was all from a very, very instinctive spiritual place. And I remember that Brian said to me, we've got to record this stuff, warts and all, from beginning to end. And the title, Bandages of Grace, was one of those more obscure song titles. I keep a little book of poetry, and when I'm doing phonetic vocals or jamming, that's where I sometimes pull from. And it opened really, as Brian said, a tsunami of possibilities, and it was very alluring to us. And it was about repairing the damage of what we've already done on the environment. That came out of the air to us. It was a lot to do with us reading William Blake, and a lot of, as I was saying, mysticism and trying to pull on that sense of where music comes from, which is invisible and magic. Talking about Trevor, our drummer, he's also, not only an incredible drummer, he programs drums wonderfully as well. And he came across and in the sandbox, we were making lots of mistakes. Gaffes were really important, as Brian said. It's important for us to make mistakes in front of each other so we could get confidence. Anyway, Trevor said we need to push the tempos up, and I'm going to play you the second track on the record now, a bit from it. The song is called The Roar of Prayer, and it was Trevor's drum programming that really inspired us with this track. So here's a bit of track 2, The Roar of Prayer.
Another way of fighting the peace of holy war. I will strike at midnight, I will be the lion's roar. It's the roar of prayer that brings me back. It's the roar of prayer like a zodiac. It's the whole affair.
That's The Roar of Prayer. As I said, we were only getting together. It was like a club every Thursday. It was Trevor that said, you guys are like in a sandbox. And it was more about bonding than anything else. It was only Thursdays we got together to make this record. So, because we both, all of us, have lives. And as John Lennon says, life will get in the way. But we came together quite religiously every Thursday if we could. And the big thing was we just sat in the kitchen for a good 2 to 3 hours talking. And that was huge to inspire this record because we talked about everything. It's a bit like Spinal Tap because the first things you talk about is like, what happened to you in hospital this week? And what pills are you taking? Yes, it was Spinal Tap part 433. But having the tea and talking, and the philosophy appeared. So then when we came into the studio, and, usually we talk for 3 hours, we only had about 3 hours to record. But we were in the mood. And that's what, you never do that. You never really get into the discussion before you move and lay back. And as old friends, it's been pretty special to do that. I remember Brian saying some guys get together every week to play poker just to stay in touch. It is a bit like that, and only you might walk away with something tangible that you've created together, and you don't lose as much money. I thought that was a good point. A very unconventional structures to these songs on this album. The logic really did come upon us out of the blue, really from improvising. And most of the songs, we found that they were like 7 minutes long, 6 minutes to 7 minutes long. That made us think we're doing a progressive rock album here. But we didn't really want to limit that because there's so much feel in experimentation, and editing can take that all out of the picture. We didn't want to be dictated to by normal song structures. And I think that shows throughout the album very powerfully, and especially on this song. It's an emotional song. I feel very proud of this track. It's called Be Calm, Cool River. And you don't always want to explain where your lyrics are coming from, but really this came from a sense of two voices talking to each other within the soul. And one voice is, particularly in the verses, saying, I don't know if I can carry on. And there's a suicidal sense. Then when the chorus hits, another voice that's inside the same person, or maybe a friend, or a message, it says, be calm, cool river. Be calm. Think about it. Step back for a second. We programmed some drums on this, and then I just played with the EQ and made them very low. Then Trevor added some incredible hand percussion, and Brian created some very, very ethereal and very emotional guitar parts. I tend to write most of my emotional stuff in E flat, which Brian goes, not again, because that's not great for a guitarist. But if you go back and look at some of the videos on my Facebook channel and Instagram, you'll see Brian creating the guitar parts for this. Anyway, let me play you a little bit of this track. It's called Be Calm, Cool River.
I am the sleep of violence that wakes from my dream of life. I'm invisible. I cannot return from here. Be calm, cool river, be calm. Under the fresh weight of the sun, before death, back into life, and dissolve us into one. Be calm, cool river, be calm, cool river. Under the dead weight of the moon, and dissolve me back into you. I need peace. I need you. In the fields of devotion, I need sweet peace, and I feel you there. Be calm, cool river, be calm. Eliminate agony. Oh, it's so painful to see the sweet lips of love bleeding in the fields of devotion. Be calm, cool river, be calm, cool river. Under the weight of
That's Be Calm, Cool River. Talking about playing bass, live bass again. It was lovely to be doing chordal bass work, and there's another song on this album called Dream You Back. I'll probably play a bit from that later on. And I was basing a lot of my bass on chordal work, and you can hear that on this track. And Brian was playing his first guitar I ever saw him with, a black Les Paul that right back in the 70s when we joined our first band, the Charlie Mullen Band. I always loved his sound on that guitar, and he's got a beautiful Strat that he plays a lot through this record, but he pulled out that vintage black Les Paul for this track, and that was a marvellous moment for me. Another thing is Brian and I singing together. We haven't done that for years, but we do have a sound. Brian's got a lower, warm tone, and I'm always singing a little bit higher than him. And you can hear here when we sing these background vocals that appear in the so-called middle eight section there, we sing In the Fields of Devotion. And there's a lot of harmonies moving around in the background that we created. I think the first day we wrote this song, we didn't even know what the song was, but we were doing the harmonies to it. And I think it was first called In the Fields of Devotion. That's how these things turn out. They change all the time. And inspiration comes from anywhere. You probably see from my website photographs, I love old pedals, guitar pedals and synthesizer pedals. And particularly on this song, I remember that we used a fantastic unit called a Cosmos Drifting Memory Station. It's really quite incredible, and you can't predict what it's going to do. And that's where we started this track from, and you'll hear it right on the fade, right at the end. Little things like that, just a sound, can make this all happen. And I want to also bring up really what Brian made me aware of. He said, a guitar buzz here and there, a bit of string noise there and here. We purposely tried to recreate a live environment of an atmosphere that hopefully, faithfully, I think he did it, reminds the listener of the sound and smell of hot guitar amps, overdriven keyboards, through very strange, small and big mic'd-up guitar amps to produce that air movement of a live speaker. Those are the things we grew up on. And, of course, today with Pro Tools and digital work, you don't get a chance to do that. And I think that's what we miss with a lot of music is, as Brian says, the air of the speakers moving. And, we fell upon, and we discussed this in our philosophy, Brian and I, that we wanted to unconsciously try and create harmonics and cross rhythms that, when on playback, we would say to each other, what is happening there? And it's a bit discordant, or where did it come from? It's a happy accident. Do we like it? And usually, in the old days, we'd probably say, no, it's a little bit out of tune or it's a little wobbly. But these days, we sat there and went, that's the real thing. That's a music coming out of a cathedral. There's a song on this album called Country of the Blind. And it was wonderful talking about guitars to see Brian bring over his old wah-wah pedal. And this track... There's a phenomenal drum track on this from Trevor. Brian and I were jamming this in the Sandbox. Actually, the Sandbox might have been a title for this album at one time. And Trevor was with us, and he heard this groove, and he said, "You got to send me the feeling of that, what you're doing today, to my home studio." And he recorded a fantastic drum part, and it really propelled the song and the energy. Let me play you a bit of this track. It's called Country of the Blind.
And I'm stealing myself. Well, I haven't been here before in a million years and I'm in time like the color sign. I'm pulling back my skin and I'm looking down inside into my country. How can it be? My country. We've got to sleep. My country. No love, no peace. My country. No sign of light in the country of the blind. Country of the blind. Sleepwalking, eyes wide shut. One day I will wake up. Sleepwalking, eyes wide shut. One day we will all wake up.
Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims cry, from every mountainside.
I've been talking to my God. I've been looking high above. And I'm looking for the gold that heals my blinded soul. My country, how can it be? My country, I've got to sleep.
Writing all the lyrics for this record, I remember Brian saying to me, you write poetry, and, where's all this stuff coming from? And, of course, I do that around the edges. And even from the days when I first recorded in the House of Stone and Light, I always see sort of juxtapositions between yourself, your body, and what the country's doing. You know, in the House of Stone and Light, it was your own body. And you had to get a sense that you had to take care of your house. And I think with Country of the Blind, this track, I felt the same thing. Like, you know, sometimes as human beings, we don't see where we're going. I know I don't. And I like to also sometimes put that kind of atmosphere into a song where it can be interpreted many ways. Personally and politically. A lot of those records that hit me as a kid, you know, like War by Edwin Starr and, What's Going On, Marvin Gaye. It was just great as a kid to feel like people were taking notice of other things, not just, I Love You, Baby. I know as a child, a young lad buying records, I was always touched by those records. Abraham, Martin and John, Bridge Over Troubled Water, My Sweet Lord. I always felt, even as a kid, that some of those songs had a depth to them that I was very interested in. And something that we'd never done really a lot of, me and Brian, brings me onto a song called Sunblade. We started to really fall in love with different time signatures, and the things when we get together on these Thursday sandbox days, we'd sometimes play each other music that was written in different time signatures, and we felt like there was a very, very, very emotional, mathematical, spiritual sense to these songs because something seemed to be rolling and overlapping, and your normal counting and your normal feel to a song was being pushed by these different tempos. And of course, our drummer, Trevor, being the best musician in the band, said, "Why don't we do a song in 13/8?" Thank you, Trevor. Yes, that'll be easy for us. And he went away and he constructed this amazing drum track, and he brought it over. And the amazing thing about this was he counted on a microphone for us to hear how 13/8 worked as we listened to the drums. And as he was doing that, Brian got on the keyboard. And on a CP70 piano sound, he started to play a bass line, and I started to play on the same keyboard as Brian was playing the piano low end. I was playing the top end, and I just jammed. And some of that really touched us. And this song turned into, I think, one of the most special tracks on the record. And it's called Sunblade.
Sunblade, walk into the rain like a never hopper. Spread out over heavens. Oh, sunblade, when the light falls a certain way, when the angels sing, angels under rain, lay down upon the lash of light, lay down upon the lash of light.
I really enjoyed playing bass on that track, and of course Trevor made it harder for us because as the song goes on, it starts changing its time signatures. Thank you, Trevor. Both Brian's head and my head exploded. There was a lot of blood on the floor trying to work out these these changes. I think Trevor had great fun in putting us through that. But that is one of my favourite tracks on the record. I enjoyed also constructing the lyrics, which are really a homage to ancient light and light in itself. I remember also that Brian was playing this very, very strange sort of mini violin bow on the guitar, and that came in quite beautifully in some of the parts of this. And Ebo, a very symphonic effect that you, like a magnet you put on the strings. Brian played that too. And some of the MIDI tracks that we recorded not thinking about, I'm talking to the tech heads here, we realized we put some different sounds on those early MIDI tracks that were to do with piano parts. And we put organs and strings and all sorts of things on those MIDI tracks. And they created some wonderful harmonics to this track. So that's Sunblade. You know, I was thinking about the things that have changed over all these years. And one of the biggest things is my singing. It's really interesting that, you notice if you've been doing it for a long time, what things are changing. And my vocals now, to me, are more passionate and a sense of, you might lose the real high octaves, but you gain a richness. And I never really used to have great vibrato. I still don't have great vibrato, but vibrato's there when I need it, which is interesting because when we were doing harmonies together, I naturally went into vibrato, and I never had vibrato as a young man. And as an old geezer now, it's appeared. So Brian would say, knock back the vibrato on when we were doing harmonies. And it was quite hard to do that. I remember when I was producing Tom Jones, I once said to him, stop doing the vibrato, Tom. It's not modern. And he did. He had control, and it didn't sound right. So it was like, if that's your sound, that's your sound. Brings me on to a track now called The Voiceless. And in fact, this track was started by all three of us being in the Owl's Nest. We'd come together just before the COVID outbreak, and we decided to write songs together in the room. And then COVID hit, and we had to dismantle everything. It was really great in that little room. Trevor brought across a smaller drum kit, and we just set up in there. And it was just great fun. But then, yes, COVID came and we had to stop. And then when we were in the middle of this record, we said, let's have a listen to some of the stuff we did back then. And this track appeared. And we got quite turned on by it. And we kept a lot of what we recorded right at the beginning, including the drums and Brian's guitar and some of my bass, which was a stereo bass. But we didn't have the lyrics. And that's really what I did. I wrote the lyrics at this stage, and it became a song called The Voiceless. And it's about instinct. I think we all know that in our heads there's two of us, and instinct and feel is something that we've always sometimes got to pull on. There's always that inner voice. So check this out. It's called The Voiceless.
In between, we are the voiceless.
For me, it was great to be back in a band again. I'd done so many solo records, and it's a solitary business writing songs. So this has been wonderful to be every Thursday in the Sandbox and being in the band. It brought back that feeling where you had to compromise, but you got turned on what the other players were doing. It was great to bring me and Brian to be relinked again. When you think about all those bands, that we loved right back in the day, Hall & Oates, they hate each other. The Beatles broke up. The Eagles hate each other. It's like we feel quite fortunate that all three of us stayed friends, and unbelievably, we live near each other in Los Angeles. That's the miracle of life. So being back in a band, I just wanted to mention it. That was great. There's a track on this record as well that I was jamming in another strange time signature for me, which was 5/4, and I was just jamming on it, and Trevor again said, I want to work on that in my own studio, send me some of that, and I was working with like a cycle of 4 chords which were quite jazzy, and Trevor came back with this drum rhythm at high speed on this 5/4 track. I think some of the effects I'd put on synthesizers at the beginning made him feel like that's where I was going. But when I heard what he played, it was unbelievable. Reminded me of like Great Weather Report or something. But I thought, how the hell am I going to sing on top of this? And then Brian came up with a terrific kind of Pink Floyd guitar line, which sort of pointed at a kind of chorus. And I'd had this title in a book for a while called All Dreams End in Daylight, and it just spoke to me. And so, still playing with Trevor's drum rhythm, thinking, how the hell do I sing on this? I jammed for quite a while around the house, and still thinking, how the hell? And all of a sudden, it sort of came to me. And my manager, Diane Poncher, who'd heard the drums when I first heard them, and I was like, oh my God. And she said, no, this is great. And so in a way, she sort of pushed me on. And then I found that I was singing and finding a lyrical a basis for this song, and it got very layered, but really quite special. Brian was playing some atmospheric guitars. We always tend to do proper guitars, we call them, what instantly comes to us. Then we do freedom guitars, and it's like, just play what you feel, pretend you don't know anything about this song. And usually when we do that, that's what we usually choose. I do that with vocals as well. Anyway, have a listen to this track. It's called All Dreams End in Daylight.
All dreams end in daylight. Shadows long, as old as angels. Mary, come down, shed your blood. Beauty without mercy, and the roots of Eden Street. All dreams end in daylight. All dreams end in daylight. Rubies and pearls have the love she got. He blew the gates of birth and death tonight. All dreams end in daylight. Beautiful without mercy, and the roots of Eden Street. Mary, come down, bathe our souls in white, womb of starlight, heal the frightened and the weak. All dreams end in daylight. and in daylight.
My goodness, what a drum track from the great Trevor Thornton. That track, you know, over the time we worked on it, it got more and more layered and it became more and more special to me. You can actually take off a lot of the instruments and it still sounds beautiful. Then you can put them all back on and do a really exquisite layering and it still sounds beautiful. It reminds me of what one of my favourite poets has said, John Keats. The excellency of every art is its intensity, capable of making all disagreeables evaporate from their being in close relation to beauty and truth. Well, it all sounds pretty magnificent, but I think that's how we came to this project. We were trying to be very, very truthful. And that brings me to actually one of the first songs we ever wrote together on this project, around when we were working on Bandages of Grace, the first track on the album. We, at the same time, built up a track, and it's really from nowhere. Went into the Owl's Nest and Brian sat down by a keyboard. I think it was called a Deep Mind keyboard, and I was playing an old Gaia keyboard, Roland, and we put these keyboards through mono amps and we just looked at each other and started to jam. And at first it was a terrible noise, terrible, but that excited us. And there was fear in the room. But then this beautiful progression started to appear. And then I found a bass line, as I mentioned earlier, which was very chordal, very, as Brian has said in the past, velvet underground kind of thing. And this song, we started to really just piece it together in a jamming form. And then I got on the microphone and started to do phonetic vocals. I did a couple of passes at it, went into the kitchen, not knowing what we'd done, had a cup of tea, and Brian said, you know that you sang something there which sounded like Dream You Back. And I said, did I? And he goes, yeah, I liked that moment. And that became the title of the song. And funny enough, I've had, around that time, I've been having dreams of people I'd lost, including my parents, and I felt like they were there. And I'm sure we've all had that. So it was like dreaming you back. You know, I want to pull you back from the other side. And really the song sort of deformed itself from that. But it was from doing phonetic vocals and Brian noticing something when I did it. I actually did sing that line out of nowhere, and we actually kept that line in the song. Let me play a bit of it to you now. It's called Dream You Back.
And face down, so broke open. The dawn breaks red, dust and blood. A threadless way, I would have stayed there. All those times I was praying, like thy soul is cast in night fire. I dream you back, just with you. Face down, I go so high. I know where to go when the stars are crawling. I dream you back. I will pray, still thy soul is cast.
As well as me using my electric mistress pedal on my bass all the time, right through this record, Brian was playing through a pedal which we love, because I buy lots of experimental pedals called Cloudburst. and Brian really used it extensively on this track and on a lot of the songs. It sort of became a trademark, My Electric Mistress and the Cloudburst pedals. If you get a chance to listen to this song all the way through, there's a kind of middle eight that appears, and we didn't even know if it was a middle eight. It was just a breakdown. And I've got an old white piano, a little out of tune in the Owl's Nest, and I went in and played these three chords that I'd sort of worked out in my head when I was at my manager's office thinking, what are we going to do there? And it was like I found these clusters, and Brian recorded me just playing it in the distance. It was like a Beatles recording. We had two mics quite a way away. And it really resonated because it's a little bit out of tune and it feels a bit like a pub piano, but it reminded me of A Day in the Life by the Beatles. Anyway, that's called Dream You Back. There's a song on the album called Pour Milk on the Fire. Pour Milk on the Fire. I was reading a book, I think it was called The Celestial Hunter by Roberto Calasso. Great author, and he was talking about ritual and how, from the beginning of time, man's always been a hunter, and their sense of ritual and sacrifice, the terrible idea of killing animals and all that stuff we hate, but also how the ritual developed into a sense where there wasn't killings in the sacrifice. And in India, they were, in ancient times, as a sacrifice. And I think still to this day, families pour milk on the fire at the beginning of the day and maybe before they go to sleep. And it was really a way of an internal sacrifice to the gods. And to stop war and to stop aggression, pour milk on the fire. Instead of real sacrifice and death, pour milk on the fire. And I thought, I really like that sentiment. And I've been watching all these different elements come in. I think Brian and I had seen the film The Sinners, and there was these Irish dancers. They were vampires, and they were stomping around, and the music was just so terrific. And it had such a feel of ancient ritual, and vampiristic stomping really got us. It reminded me of great Irish music, folk music, but also this sense of traditional ritual stomping. And then we got together and we really built this kind of stomping rhythm. Trevor was with us, so it was like we just started to stomp, and we recorded on this wooden floor and did clapping. And that was with the basis of this track. I won't say any more because this is really what it's about. Not really vampires stomping in Irish vampires in the forest. It's more about pour milk on the fire before we get aggressive. Before we go to war, let's pour milk on the fire. I remember Brian had been playing through a great vintage yellow old Fender guitar amp, And this one we brought in the Vox AC30, and that tone was like, whoa, it was roaring on that track. And that's Pour Milk on the Fire. You know, I was reading also about Sanskrit grammarians' notion that imagination is a specialized mode of listening to the still, undefined vibrations that underlie all phenomena. So staying in touch there with the Indian vibe. Doing this album, and we're getting to the last track on the album, 10 Fingers of Flame, there was a magic I think we couldn't fathom. That's really what I'm trying to get across, is when we were working together, we really weren't sure what territory we were going into. Now, you know, most songwriters and bands might say, well, we never know what we're doing, you know, where we're heading. But as a songwriter through the years, many times, I've had a great idea where we're going. And before you even start, you have a sense of what you're aiming for. The thing about this project is we talked for a great deal about what was moving us in our lives, from everything from personal to politics to health to philosophy. And so before we moved in and had 17 cups of coffee or tea, when we went into work, we were in that kind of meditative place, I think. Hard to put into words, but as I want to say again, it was a magic we couldn't really fathom. And we found that incredibly inspiring to us after all these years. You know, if you've done it all these years, as I have, and we all have, Brian and Trevor, you are, I think, searching for something totally different to nab your curiosity. And this process of being speaking about from our souls before we moved into the room to write. And some of those writing sessions really turned into nothing. I mean, really. I mean, we failed quite as much as we thought maybe that's worth keeping. But then we'd have a week away from it so we could listen to the stuff and then say, hey, I think there's something there, or like, we need to throw that out the window. But what I'm trying to portray here, before I play a bit of the last track, 10 Fingers of Flame, is we were looking for a magic we couldn't fathom, we couldn't work out. This last track was a reflection of Brian and myself trying to be minimal. Brian had just left for a while to go to see his grandchild in New York. And before he left, we talked about being minimal and not having much on the track. And so I sort of started a few chords on the piano. Actually, the great art director that's been working with us, James Thornton, was working in the living room on doing some graphics for the album, and I just sat in the other room at the piano and went through quite an interesting chord structure. Again, not really knowing where it would lead, but when Brian came back from New York, I played it to him, and we saw this minimal feeling, and I started to do a few guide vocals, which again were phonetic, but there was a real blues element to it, for me and Brian, a real sense of blues, mixed with, in a way, a choral, ethereal element. And I'd had this, again, a feeling of a title called 10 Fingers of Flame, which was really relating to what I'd been reading about, the desert fathers, the desert priests, when they lost their faith out there in the desert and they talked to each other. I remember one priest was saying to another, well, you have to look for that flame of spirit inside you. Try and look upon your 10 fingers of flame. Try and inspire yourself from the inner flame. Not really knowing what that meant, it helped me sing some of this song. And Brian went into my other room where I have an acoustic guitar, a Taylor guitar, and he brought that through and he created on the spot such a beautiful acoustic thematic theme that I think took this song into another place. Anyway, here's a bit of 10 Fingers of Flame.
Let her know the Lord and the sins of my brother, yeah. Them fingers of flame can lie in rage and truth. cry a lullaby, it will find you. Love will take a side tread of the angels. Broken love and fall, yeah, it can find you. Love was in the stone, treasures in the sky. Touch the silver and rays of war behind me. You're the Holy Ghost in the maid soul.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little excursion into the new album I recorded with Brian Fairweather called Bandages of Grace, released on June the 30th, 2026. Sounds like the 10 Commandments of man, doesn't it? That was good fun for me. I wasn't sure I was going to do a podcast for this album, but I thought, it would be quite good to let people know, if they're interested, how we sort of came together and did this in quite an unusual way. It feels a special album to us as old geezers who have been doing it for many, many years. As I said, we've come together at the 11th hour. It feels special to us because I think it's because it was unplanned and came from a different kind of inspiration for us. We were motivated more about brotherhood and bonding. I just want to thank, from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure Brian and Trevor would say the same, like to thank Diane Poncher, my manager, who was the executive producer on this album. She had just such a overview of what we were up to, and of course, as she's always been, always pushing us on and inspiring us when we would wobble. Also want to thank Mike Rodriguez, who's helped me with my studios. And in fact, some of this record was recorded when I did a lot of upgrades. So thank you, Mike. And James Thornton, who's been doing fantastic graphics and teasers for us, a real genius of art, and helped us get our communication across on the internet with his great artwork. And Zena Fairweather, Brian's wife, an incredible artist. She worked with me right back in the House of Stone and Light days and created a great symbol for me and the album that still remains with me, the Celtic Man. I call him the Celtic Man. While Zena listened to the record, listened to what we were doing and where we were coming from with the sense of spirit and mysticism, and she created the album vibe, the cover, the comet, inspiration taken from the Bio Tapestry, the comet there. And she studied really what we were about. And in all her symbols, there's an inner logic and an inner meaning that relates to me and Brian and the creativity of the record. Thank you, Zena. Also want to thank Vanessa Levitt, who's been with me from the beginning of time and helping me get everything and us out onto the internet. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, all of you out there that may have purchased this album and are getting into it. That's what it's about. Hope we've touched some people. So from me, Martin Page, and from Brian Fairweather somewhere, and Trevor Thornton somewhere, I'll see them on Thursday when they come across again for the Sandbox. Thanks for joining me, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
on the stove. Come into my home, I will find you.